You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Miller.
And this is Ken Miller. Welcome to our show, all about real estate with Ken and Jane. Today, Jane, we're going to discuss the recent settlement by the National Association of Realtors of the lawsuit that's been in the news.
Yes. We have a lot of audience and past clients and calling and to ask more details because that was like, for the public anyway, there was like a bombshell Friday night, right?
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of public, a lot of news media on it. So let's we're going to first of all summarize what the lawsuit was about, what the settlement implications are, and then look at the picture, what it means for the future of doing business for realtors in the state of New Jersey, our home state. So a few years ago, there was a class action lawsuit that was brought against the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and 4 corporate defendants. The lawsuit alleged that it was brought in the Federal District Court in Missouri, and the allegation was that that home sellers were being damaged due to the requirement that by NAR imposed that any realtor association, MLS, multiple list system, must publish a buyer co-broker compensation. And the core of the lawsuit was that this offer of compensation to the buyer's agents artificially inflated the commission that the sellers had to pay out. That it was kind of that had this rule not been in effect, that the commissions would have been less, and that was the allegation. NAR has always vehemently denied it, and they previously maintained that commissions were and continue to be negotiable. There never was any fixed rate, but the perception was that there was a fixed, artificially inflated rate, and hence you had the lawsuit. But
I have to say, Ken, since the first day I got my real estate license, that was on the test, on the basic test. Forget about the broker's test, even more question on that. So whether the commission is fixed or negotiable, always negotiable.
Correct.
It's never be fixed. And also, furthermore, the agency are prohibited to discuss about commission, because that's like you try to fix the market. That's illegal too.
Correct.
So that's really since the day one until today, I guess, I think it's just like from the homeowner, from the client perspective, they think it's fixed. But as far as me as a real estate professional, I was taught and trained from the day one, before even I get my license, after pass test, get license. Mm-hmm. Even before that, the commission always negotiable.
Correct.
That's not, NRA denying the allegation. Based on always negotiable, I can say, it is true, because since the day one, I always been trained and taught the commission is negotiable.
Right. And all the ethics training that we're required to do as members of NAR always emphasize that commissions are negotiable, and there's never any reference to any set percentage or any set
amount.
Fixed amount. It's always negotiable.
Always negotiable.
Negotiable. That's always been their emphasis in every ethics training class that I've attended.
Yes. I think, once again, this is new to us. It just happened, right? And it's a lot of confusion. But as a real estate agent professional, what I read, what I heard, I think it's just both sides have some point, right? Because the seller, saying in a lawsuit, basically, they have to pay buyer commission, right? And then, but on the other hand, somebody have to pay the commission. So if not the seller, buyer have to pay the commission. I think the public may not know, right? In the past or currently, all this time, MLS had the field in the computer system. You have to put a compensation. You cannot put nothing because the computer wouldn't allow you to finish the listing. I think that's why the lawsuit
right.
But in currently, even always, right, the compensation field, if you put a $1, they will let you go through. Say, for example, I sell your home, list your home, represent you as a seller agent, right? If I put that field, because there's all commission negotiable. There's no law said you have to give percentage or give $1, right? It's all negotiable. So if I put in the listing, we're paying buyer agent $1, the current system will allow that to go through. So that's current system. But I understand after July, when the new law take effect, if it does take effect, you don't have to put anything. And in fact, you're not allowed to put anything now. Used to be you can put anything. If you can't go through. Minimum is $1. You can put $1 or more, whatever. But the new law after July, you cannot put anything in, even though the seller willingly to offer the compensation to the buyer agent. I think they have a point. A seller need to be informed.
Yes.
They don't have to.
Right.
They do not have to pay buyers agent commission. But if the seller want to help the buyer move forward, want to have a more offer, they try to to give some benefit to the buyer,
right,
to attract the buyer, more offers.
Right.
So they willingly offer, even though the seller knows by law they don't have to.
And that's been NAR's position and continues to be that cooperative compensation to the co-broker, the buyer's agent, remains a choice for consumers when buying or selling a home. And the NAR happens to be America's largest trade organization with about 1.5 million members. So it's quite a powerful force in the United States.
After this law take effect next year, 2025, have a head count, say how many agents will still be in the business.
Right.
That's a question to be seen.
So the lawsuit, again, they reach a settlement. So we're going to go over the terms of it now. The settlement still has to be approved by the court, which could take a few months. But they're pretty confident that the court will approve it. And if it is approved, then in New Jersey, starting in July 2024, there will be changes. Number one will be that the buyer, again, the MLSs, the multiple list systems, cannot reveal any buyer compensation. They can't say the buyer is being paid X% or the buyer is offered a flat fee of Y dollars. It cannot be shown anywhere in the listing agreement, in the remarks, in the licensing. No. That's completely out. So, and the reason I think the logic behind it, that's already first of all, that's already the common practice for commercial listings. The co-broker compensation, if any, is not disclosed. And I think the logic behind the court and the settlement was that by not publishing it, you're not creating an artificial industry standard. Whereas if you start publishing it and everybody's offering, they see that the competition is offering the same. By keeping it more secretive, you're not creating like a standard, a perceived standard.
Yes, exactly.
That's my personal view on it.
I agree. Yeah. So just like if say for example, I mean this is totally out of the topic. If I know how much cost you bought that pair of shoes, and I have that number in my head, so when my daughter needs the new sneakers, I roughly know how much it should be. So I think that's what the court tried to avoid. That's everything negotiable.
Right. So, and it doesn't mean that don't confuse this with not publishing. It does not mean that the sellers cannot offer the buyer agent a commission, a co-broker. Yes. It just means that it can't be published. It can no longer be published on the multiple list system. Yes. So this settlement, it absolves NAR. It also provides relief for claims against over 1 million individual NAR members. It provides relief to all MLS associations that are owned by the association, and it also absolves any claims against all brokerages within NAR as a principal that had a residential transaction volume in 2022 of less than $2 billion or below. Mm-hmm. That's who the settlement relieves. So now we're going to get into the details of what the settlement is. So again, we said monetarily, they have to pay $415 million over a 4-year time period. Number two, we discussed they have to put into effect the new rule for the MLS, which is going to, of not showing any broker. Any buyer broker compensation, and we're going to break that down. And then thirdly, this is something that's already in play in about 40 states. They have to, any buyer agent that's going to work with a buyer has to enter into a written buyer-agent agreement with that buyer specifying what the services are going to provide and how they're going to be compensated.
Yes.
That's something that again, in New Jersey has always had that. A lot of brokers and the NAR have always recommended that. But now if the settlement gets approved by the court, that's going to become mandatory as of July 2024.
Yeah, because that's really, I mean, if the buyer need to pay the compensation, they need to know how much the compensation will be. Just like a seller, when I represent the seller, we have to talk about negotiate the fees, how we're going to charge, what service we provide, and because sellers paying the fee, right? But now, if the buyer needs to pay their own commission, and they should know, because once again, this new law change is not going to affect the seller continue willing to pay the buyer compensation, attract more offers, and but the buyer won't know, right, until they know which house. So they have to get into the agreement with the buyer agent. That agreement, in fact, in my opinion, right, and once again, it's just my opinion. I don't want people misinterpret it like otherwise. It's just my opinion. I feel in the past, right, buyer has more flexibility to choose their agent. Say, for example, as a listing agent, if you hire a person, you thought the person is great, show very well interview or through referral, right? You hire the agent. Once you sign the listing agreement, you and that agent, quote unquote, married for that period of time. So a month later, if you feel the agent not perform up to your standard, there's really, unless, not much you can do unless you both mutually agreed to cancel the agreement. Mm-hmm. So I had that many times because that was 2011, 2012, very hard to sell the homes. And some owner chose the referred agent from the friends, family, or the agent sold them the house years ago. And they felt the agent not working on the weekend, not doing open house, or send some new agent there without training, whatever happened, right? They're not happy. And then they decided to hire us to represent them. But they can't. They have to get the unconditional release from the other brokerage, right? The agent and agency, right? So, but with the buyer, you don't have that issue. I mean, at the end of the day, I found if you go out with an agent, after a while, you just didn't think it fits. Instead of sending formal letter and say I terminated our relationship, and most buyers decided not to answer your phone.
Correct.
So that would be the end of it, right?
It was more like the Wild West, where there were the absence of a buyer-agent written agreement, then there was no loyalty between the client and there was no bonding between the client and the buyer agent.
Yeah.
So this will add a little bit more
protection to the buyer agent.
Professionalism to the
industry. Also, right, the buyer now used to be the buyer will call. Doesn't matter, they got a number from online, whatever. They will call a person and say, hey, show me this house. They don't think twice. At least the seller normally interview the agent, want to see what agent offers, show their record, show what they've done, and feedback and reference. But a buyer normally just call and you open the door for me. But now if the buyer have to sign agreement for a period of time and at agreed compensation, I hope the buyer will interview their agent more carefully. So that's going to help the industry, because at the moment, anybody high school education, passed the test, did the 75 hours study, passed the test, didn't get a real estate license. But in the future, you have to go through interview just like I have all the time with the seller.
Be more analogous.
It's better for the public in a way. I personally believe it is definitely benefit for the public.
We're going to continue to discuss this. Why don't we just take a short break, and we'll be right back after these messages. All right, welcome back to our show. So let's continue discussing the implications of the buyer-agent agreement in New Jersey. That looks like it's going to be coming down the pike by July of this year. So it'll certainly add a more defined role and responsibilities. And it just because there's the buyer agent agreement, I guess the NAR is going to work on that and the language, but it still has to be refined. But I think the general idea is that the buyer and the buyer agent will come to an agreement that the buyer will be compensated either Y percentage or X dollars based on what they agreed to. Again, it's
subject to the
it'll be subject, but that doesn't mean that
the
agreement.
they offer.
And it could mean, but in the case where the seller, if the buyer finds a house with the buyer agent wherein the seller is offering to pay Z commission and the buyer agreement is getting Y, then they could, if Z is less than Y, then
Ken, I think you're getting too much details, right? That's really should be spelled out in the buyer agreement. For example, I think, once again, don't quote me on this. It's just the free discussion here. It's nothing really, doesn't mean that I know the law better than anyone. I don't. I get the same, publication from the public. It's nothing really concrete yet. Just say, if you hire me as your buyer agent, right? We agreed on something. In that document, I would assume you put there if you get compensation from the seller as well. If you did, and then maybe you wouldn't charge the buyer or some kind of language or be discounted. Well, that has to be in the agreement. And for the audience there, right? If you are in the market to buy, ask that question in July when someone asks you to send your buyer. First of all, interview your buyer agent, ask their credentials, ask the knowledge and local market and everything else, right? And you have to interview them, just like the listing agent interview us, the listing agent, and ask the question about compensation. Just say, if the seller offer you X, and then what happened? Do I have to still pay this? I'm going to pay the difference. If the seller offer you less, and do I have to make up the difference as a buyer? Or if seller offer you more, and what happened to that more, right? Mm-hmm. You have to ask, because the reason is, if the seller offered more, as a buyer, you may ask for that. The extra can be used as, the credit to buyer closing cost, maybe, right? I'm just put out there. If that's a good discussion between the buyer and the buyer agent. But, hire the experienced one. They can guide you better. Yeah. So they definitely can guide you in the process.
Yeah. Now we're going to discuss about the advantages and disadvantages of the seller's perspective of offering a co-broker agreement. And one thing that NAR was very clear on in their public statement was that they feel strongly that the sellers should still offer the commission to the co-brokers, because you don't want to disadvantage the first-time home buyers, the low-income buyers, and the general buyer pool. You want to promote the healthy competition for the whole marketplace, and by not offering any compensation from the seller side, you could exclude some of those markets I just mentioned.
Ken, I look at it from different perspective. You look at it from legal, moral, right? I look at it from basic, practical way, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who pays the commission. The seller only care what net in his or her pocket, correct? They only care about the net. Say, for example, right? Once again, I'm just free talking here. Don't quote me on this. It's just my thought. May not be correct, right? But it's just my thought. If you have a 10 apple, okay? At the end of the day, you said, Jane, I have a 10 apple. I have a 10 fruit. They are apples, okay? So if now, according to the changes, we relabel certain thing. At the end, you may have 5 apple, 3 orange, and 2 peach. So total of what you get is still 10, correct? I know this may be a little bit different because peach, orange may be different price with apple, right? There could be more, could be less. That's same with the seller. The seller only care about net. I always tell all my sellers, client, I said, I never believe you paid my commission. Why? I did. I said, no, because I brought you such a wonderful variety of offers, beat the price up. At the end, isn't it, is the final net number exceed your expectation? Yes. Is our service exceed your expectation? Yes. So therefore you think you paid it, or you think buyer paid you more in real term. The buyer paid it with a high contract price. Yes. I said, here you go.
Right.
You know?
But so the economics does tie in though to the net, because when we talk about buyer size pools, if you have 2,000 buyers or versus 200 buyers, what do you think the probability wise you have a better chance, more likely if
to
you
get
have
more.
You have a chance to get a higher offer. If the more participants in the game, the more chance that the offer is going to be higher in the net. So I think the conversation, every list agent is going to have their conversation with their clients when they go for a listing appointment and explain
you don't
to
have
the sellers,
to pay commission.
Right, you don't
It's
have
not
to pay commission, but
by
you have
law,
to,
you don't have to.
But you're going to have to then explain the pros and cons of offering or not offering any commission. And one thing on this that's interesting in the law for New Jersey is with the dual agency. A dual agency relationship is defined if the seller agent is also the buyer agent, like if Jane represented the seller and she represented the buyer. Also, a dual agency is if Jane represents the seller and anybody in our firm, RE/MAX First Realty, represents
we don't own the firm. We don't own the firm, but we have nothing to do with the ownership. But because we work for RE/MAX,
right? Because commissions are paid to the broker,
not to the agent.
So if two agents work for the same brokerage, one represents the buyer, one represents the seller. That constitutes a dual agency. And in that situation, under this proposed this settlement, if you have a dual agency relationship, they can only be paid by one side. So either the seller, so if the seller is already offering a commission to the list agent, then if a dual agent comes along, they cannot be paid by the buyer side under a buyer agreement. They must be, if they're to be compensated, they must be compensated by the seller.
Yes, I think that's a good, it's really up to the each listing agent, once again, interview your agent so they can explain that better, right? There's other way, in my opinion, can be done, because in MLS, there's a alternative agreement. Say, for example, the seller may say, okay, I will give you X percentage or X amount compensate my listing agent work. But if the company, because like RE/MAX of hundreds, very high achiever agent there, I want to get more offers and quality offers. So I would have to offer, if there's a dual agency offer, the seller will offer extra to compensate that agent. So maybe that's a conversation. Once again, if you guys have question sellers out there, when you interview your agent, please ask your agent. I'm more than happy to answer your question, but it's only my personal opinion. But interview agent, because each listing agent may have different understanding, different way to explain it. So this is just new. So we are learning as much as the public learning now. So, but that's my understanding. Ken, you're absolutely right. When you have a dual agency, the commission only can be paid by one party, either the seller or the buyer. But one party, because you already signed the listing agreement with your listing agent, so you already agreed to pay the listing agent. So therefore, if the same company agent brought the buyer, that agent will not get compensated by the buyer. No.
Right, and it's also, you should quantify that it's not all RE/MAXs, it's just the RE/MAX.
Everything, doesn't matter. You work for Coldwell Banker, you work for Weichert, you work for anyone.
You're missing the point. What I'm saying to explain to the audience is it's not that if everybody who works for RE/MAX constitutes a dual agency, only if they work for the particular brokerage of the list agent, because RE/MAX has many different brokerages that are different owners. So
just like McDonald's, McDonald's, some
so
corporate
it have to be the same owner, right? Yeah. So it's not like anybody who comes to you from RE/MAX constitutes a dual agency. If they come from the same broker-owned office, just like with Caldwell or Weichert, I presume it's the same rules. So
a lot of real estate company
it's the same broker-owned business. For both agents work for that same broker, then it constitutes a dual agency.
Correct, and like McDonald's, they have some office is a corporate owned, that's a bigger umbrella. All of them are the dual agency. Some of them only individually. So, by individual owner or owners. So that's the difference. So this is very complicated. But once again, when you interview a listing agent, go through it, ask which agency they work and the ownership of that, try to understand better the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with variable agreements, that's something that's been on the books. It's already on the
day
books.
one. Yeah, there's always...
You can always do a variable listing agreement where you have an alternate commission agreement if a certain situation arises where you might be getting X percentage. However, if sometimes the list agents, make an agreement if they sell themselves and they're to be paid, Y dollars or whatever.
Exactly.
So
that's always there. I think the only difference is now you can't publish publicly what was the whether the seller gave a buyer agent compensation, secondly how much, that's the thing. But it doesn't stop the buyer agent call the listing agent and say, hey Jane, I saw you 123 Main Street and what's the commission. I believe you still can do that. So if they ask me, I have to tell them.
Yes, they can. They made that clear.
I have to tell them.
Absolutely, you can. So we have a few minutes left. So how's this going to shape out for the landscape of real estate business in New Jersey in about a minute?
I think, Ken, from listing point of view, they're still pretty much the same. You can't publish it. That's about it. And you have to definitely explain to the owner. We always do, but you have to emphasize, by law you don't have to, but the benefit if you do. And I think you will see, once again, personal opinion here, you will see a lot of buyer agent may write on the contract at addendum saying seller agreed to give buyer closing cost credit towards the paying buyer commission. Or they just in there say seller agreed to pay the commission. So either way, we're going to see more of that if the seller didn't offer them in the first place.
Right.
So once again, seller, when you read the contract after July, you have to look at the net because you always have to go in the last page to see whether there's any seller credit. See, in the past, we always have they offer you $500,000 for the house. And the last page, they said seller agreed to pay buyer closing costs $20,000. You have to read that. So that's the net. You always work on the net number.
Right.
So once again, that's your listing agent should sit down with you, go through the process.
Right. And in
hold
the past,
your hands.
Right. In the past, seller concessions were always a stick point because that could impact the appraisals. But in this current market where everybody is still it's still a very heavy seller's market, everybody's waiving the appraisal contingency, so it's not that relevant.
Not many people ask for it.
But eventually the seller's concessions by jacking up the price to cover the concession could be problematic for the appraisal issue. Right.
Yes.
All right, we're going to have more shows on this down the road, but that's what we have for now. Hope this was informative. We'll see everyone next week.
Thank you.